The crystal wine glass shattered in my hand as the manila envelope hit the mahogany dining table. Blood trickled down my wrist, but I barely felt it. The pain was nothing compared to the humiliation burning through my chest as 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me. I'm Olive, and this was supposed to be just another Blake family Thanksgiving dinner. What is this? My voice came out steadier than I expected, though my fingers trembled as I reached for the envelope. Divorce papers. Emerson's voice was flat, practiced. He'd rehearsed this moment, probably with his mother Eleanor watching approvingly from her throne-like chair at the head of the table. I thought it would be better to do this here, with family present. Better for whom? The question died in my throat as Cora, my sister-in-law, let out a poorly disguised snicker. She'd been waiting for this moment since the day Emerson and I got married. "You're serving me divorce papers at Thanksgiving dinner?" The words tasted like acid. The turkey and cranberry sauce on my plate suddenly looked obscene. "Well, darling," Eleanor's voice dripped with false sympathy, "we thought it would be easier this way. The family could provide emotional support." Allie, my best friend who'd insisted on coming with me this year, grabbed my hand under the table. Thank God she was here. "Emotional support?" I echoed, watching blood drip onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Like the emotional support you showed when you called my art glorified finger painting last Christmas." "Oh, come now," Cora chimed in, wine sloshing in her glass. "Let's not pretend your little hobby was ever going to amount to anything. Remember that gallery showing where nobody bought a single piece?" The room erupted in cruel laughter. Even the cousins I thought were on my side joined in. I looked at Emerson, searching for any trace of the man who'd once defended my passion for art, who'd helped me set up my studio in the guest house of this very estate. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I think what everyone's trying to say," Eleanor continued, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "is that it's time to face reality. You're not cut out for this family, Olive. We need someone more substantial." My hand brushed against my purse, where a folded document had been sitting for months. The deed to this very house, the Blake family estate, transferred to my name in a moment of drunken generosity by Emerson on our 5th anniversary. He'd forgotten about it by morning, but I'd quietly filed the paperwork. "You're right, Eleanor." I stood up slowly, letting the blood drip freely onto her precious tablecloth. "I'm not cut out for this family. I'm better than it." "Excuse me?" Emerson finally looked at me, his face flushing red. "Allie, would you mind driving me to the emergency room? I seem to have cut myself." I turned to the stunned faces around the table. "Oh, and Eleanor? You might want to get the tablecloth cleaned quickly. Bloodstains are such a nightmare to remove, almost as difficult as eviction notices." "Eviction notices?" Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Enjoy the turkey. It might be your last meal in this dining room." The silence that followed me out was deafening. As Allie helped me to her car, I heard the chaos erupting behind us, raised voices, slamming doors, Emerson calling my name. "Holy shit," Allie whispered as we pulled away from the estate. "Are you okay?" I watched the mansion shrink in the side mirror, its windows glowing warm and inviting. A facade, just like everything else about the Blakes. "No," I answered honestly. "But I will be." "What did you mean about eviction notices?" I pulled out the deed with my good hand, careful not to get blood on it. "Remember when Emerson got drunk last year and started talking about how this house should belong to someone who actually appreciates its history?" Allie's eyes widened as she glanced at the document. "No way." "Yes way. He signed over the deed that night. I've been sitting on it, wondering if I should tell him." I looked down at my bleeding hand. "I guess now I know what to do with it." "What are you thinking?" The first genuine smile of the evening spread across my face. "I'm thinking this place would make an excellent art gallery. After all, Eleanor always said this house needed more culture." As we drove toward the hospital, I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation was still there, but it was being replaced by something else, determination. They wanted to break me? Fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sometimes the best art comes from broken things. 7 stitches, I announced, holding up my bandaged hand as I walked into Allie's apartment. The doctor said I'm lucky I didn't sever any tendons. Lucky isn't exactly the word I'd use for anything that happened today. Allie handed me a glass of wine, in a plastic cup this time. Your phone's been blowing up, by the way. 23 missed calls from Emerson. I sank into her plush couch, exhausted. Let him sweat. So, are we going to talk about the nuclear bomb you're sitting on? Allie curled up in her armchair, tucking her feet under her. That deed is serious business, Olive. I know. I took a long sip of wine. I already called Riley. The lawyer? When? From the hospital. She's coming over first thing tomorrow morning. I pulled out my phone and finally looked at the messages. Oh, this is Rich. Listen to what Cora just sent. How dare you embarrass our family like this? After everything we've done for you? Allie snorted. Everything they've done for you? Like what? Criticize your art? Exclude you from family photos? Make snide comments about your clothes? The memories flooded back unbidden. Remember last summer's garden party? When Eleanor told all her friends I was the cleaning lady because she was embarrassed to introduce me as her daughter-in-law? God, yes. And Emerson just stood there pretending not to hear. He always just stood there. My voice cracked slightly. 5 years of marriage, and he never once truly stood up for me. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Allie peeked through the peephole and cursed. It's Emerson. Olive! His voice carried through the door. I know you're in there. We need to talk. I shook my head at Allie, who called out, She doesn't want to see you, Emerson. Go home. This is ridiculous. Something thudded against the door, probably his fist. You can't just threaten my family's home. That deed was a mistake, and you know it. I walked to the door, my heart pounding. A mistake? Like serving me divorce papers at Thanksgiving dinner was a mistake? That's different. I was trying to... To what? Humiliate me? Congratulations, mission accomplished. I pressed my bandaged hand against the door. But you know what's funny? While you were all laughing at my failed art career, I was quietly building something else. Something you didn't notice because you were too busy being ashamed of me. What are you talking about? My paintings might not sell, Emerson, but my art restoration business is doing just fine. I've been saving every penny, waiting for the right opportunity. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Guess what? You just handed it to me. The silence on the other side of the door was deafening. Go home, I said finally. Talk to your lawyer. I'll be talking to mine. His footsteps retreated slowly, and I slumped against the wall. Art restoration business? Allie raised an eyebrow. Since when? Remember Francisco, my old art professor? I pulled out my phone and showed her my business website. He's been mentoring me for the past year. Turns out rich people will pay a fortune to have their family heirlooms restored. I've been working out of his studio. Allie scrolled through the site, her eyes widening. These are incredible. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because they never asked. I took my phone back. They were so convinced I was a failure, they never bothered to look closer. Even Emerson stopped asking about my hobby months ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. Got your message. Reviewed the deed. It's ironclad. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss options. Allie read the message over my shoulder. What exactly are you planning? I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. That house has been a symbol of everything I'm not supposed to be. Everything the Blakes said I could never achieve. So I'm going to turn it into exactly what I am. An art gallery? Not just any gallery. I turned back to her, feeling more certain with every word. A restoration studio and gallery. A place where broken things become beautiful again. Where the past gets a second chance to shine. They're going to fight you on this, Allie warned. Let them. I held up my bandaged hand. They've already drawn first blood. Now it's my turn. My phone buzzed again. Eleanor this time. You ungrateful little nobody. You have no idea what you're getting into. I showed the message to Allie, who whistled low. You know what this means, right? Yeah. I typed out a quick response. Actually, Eleanor, I do. See you in court. Then I blocked her number, and for the first time since that envelope hit the table, I felt truly free. Francisco's studio smelled like linseed oil and possibility. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced around his latest restoration project, a Baroque frame that had seen better centuries. "So," he said, setting down his tools, "you finally told them to go to hell." Not in those exact words. I traced my fingers along the frame's intricate carvings, but close enough. "Good." Francisco pulled up 2 stools. "Now, tell me about this gallery idea of yours." I'd spent the morning with Riley, going over legal strategies. Now I needed something different, artistic vision. I pulled out my tablet and showed Francisco the floor plans of the Blake estate. "The main hall could be the primary gallery space," I explained, zooming in. "Those windows face north, perfect lighting. And look at these side rooms." "Stop." Francisco held up a paint-stained hand. "You're thinking too small." "What do you mean?" "You're planning a gallery, yes? But what are you going to fill it with?" He gestured around his studio. "These restoration projects we do, they're not just about fixing broken art. They're about bringing stories back to life." Understanding dawned. "You think I should showcase the restoration process itself?" "Exactly." His eyes lit up. "Imagine, one wing shows the before pieces, damaged, forgotten works. Another shows the restoration in progress. And the main gallery? That's where you display the finished pieces in all their glory." "Like a metaphor," I whispered. "Breaking something down to build it back stronger. Now you're thinking like an artist." Francisco walked to a cabinet and pulled out a dusty canvas. "Remember this?" My throat tightened. It was my first attempted restoration, a landscape I'd nearly ruined before Francisco taught me the proper techniques. "You were so afraid of making mistakes," he continued. "But look at it now." The painting gleamed in the morning light, its colors more vibrant than the original artist had ever achieved. "That's what I want," I said suddenly. "I want to show people that broken things don't have to stay broken. That sometimes the restoration is more beautiful than the original." Francisco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Speaking of the Blakes, Eleanor's been calling me all morning." "What? Why?" "Trying to convince me to talk you out of this." He chuckled. "She offered to commission 3 pieces." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I don't work with people who mock my best student." He squeezed my shoulder. "Now, let's talk about your opening exhibition." My phone rang, Emerson's number. I declined the call. "He's persistent," Francisco observed. "He's desperate. The family lawyer probably told them how solid the deed is." I pulled out my sketchbook. "But enough about them. I want to show you some ideas." Francisco stopped me again. "Before you do, I have something for you." He disappeared into his storage room and returned with a large, covered canvas. "I've been saving this for the right moment." He pulled off the sheet, and I gasped. It was one of my paintings from 2 years ago, a self-portrait I'd abandoned after Cora called it amateurish at a family dinner. "You kept it?" "I restored it," he corrected. "Added some touches here and there. Look closely." I stepped forward. The woman in the painting, me, stood in a shaft of light, her face half in shadow. But Francisco had added something, a subtle crown of gold leaf in her hair, barely visible except when the light hit it just right. "You always had a queen inside you," he said softly. "You just needed the right light to see it." Tears pricked my eyes. This has to be in the opening exhibition. "Of course, but not alone." He grabbed a fresh canvas and set it on an easel. "I think it's time for a companion piece. The queen claiming her throne, perhaps?" My phone buzzed again. A text from Riley. "Eleanor's lawyer reached out. They want to negotiate." I showed Francisco the message. He handed me a brush. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I dipped the brush in deep royal purple. "I want to paint." "Good answer." He set up his own canvas beside mine. "Remember what I taught you about composition? The eye needs somewhere to land. And about color? Sometimes the boldest statement is the quietest shade. And about revenge?" I paused, brush hovering over canvas. You never taught me about revenge. Yes, I did. He smiled. Every time we restored a painting that someone had given up on, every time we proved them wrong with beauty instead of anger. I looked at the blank canvas, then at my bandaged hand, then at the text from Riley. Finally, I looked at Francisco. Teach me more, I said. And as the morning light filled the studio, we began to paint my revenge, not in blacks and reds, but in colors that would make even Eleanor Blake wish she'd seen my worth sooner. The cafe was exactly halfway between my apartment and the Blake estate, neutral territory. Emerson sat at a corner table, his usual crisp appearance slightly rumpled. 3 days of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his tie hung loose around his neck. You look terrible, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Olive. He straightened up. Thank you for coming. You said it was important. I kept my bandaged hand visible on the table between us. A reminder. The waitress approached, but Emerson waved her away. I need you to stop this madness. Mother is beside herself. The house has been in our family for generations. Interesting. I tilted my head. Is that what you told yourself when you planned to serve me divorce papers at Thanksgiving dinner? Mother would approve of this? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was poorly handled. Poorly handled? I laughed, drawing looks from nearby tables. You humiliated me in front of your entire family. They laughed, Emerson. They laughed while I bled. I never meant what? For me to fight back? For me to be anything more than the disappointing artist wife you could never quite bring yourself to defend? He reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. I have an offer, he said, switching tactics. The family is willing to buy the house from you. Name your price. Of course, everything was always about money with the Blakes. Not interested. Be reasonable, Olive. What are you going to do with a house that size? Turn it into some sort of... He waved his hand dismissively. Art space? Actually, yes. I pulled out my tablet and showed him Francisco's preliminary designs. The main hall will be the gallery. The east wing will house the restoration studio. The west wing will be... Stop! Emerson pinched the bridge of his nose. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Can't what? Succeed? Make something of myself? I leaned forward. Or is it that you can't stand the thought of me turning your precious family estate into something that actually matters? Mother will never allow this. Mother doesn't have a choice. I stood up. Neither do you. He grabbed my wrist. Wait, please. There's something else. I sat back down, curious despite myself. Cora's pregnant, he said quietly. She and her husband were supposed to move into the estate next month. It's tradition. The next generation always raises their children there. The news hit like a physical blow. Cora, who'd made my life hell for 5 years, was going to have everything she'd ever wanted. That's not my problem. Olive, please, if not for me, then for who? The family that never accepted me? The sister-in-law who mocked every piece of art I ever created? I pulled my wrist free. You know what tradition I'm starting? Being the first person in that house who actually creates something instead of just inheriting it. His face hardened. You're making a mistake. No, Emerson. I made a mistake 5 years ago when I married you. I stood again. Tell Cora congratulations. I'm sure she'll raise her child to be just as kind and accepting as the rest of you. This isn't over, he called after me as I walked away. Actually, it is. I turned back one last time. Oh, and you might want to warn your mother. The contractors start next week. I'd hate for all that construction noise to disturb her afternoon tea. Outside, I called Allie. How'd it go? She asked. About as well as expected. I started walking, needing to move. Did you know Cora's pregnant? What? No way. Yeah, apparently I'm destroying some grand family tradition by not letting them raise the next generation of entitled Blakes in that house. So what are you going to do? I stopped at a red light, watching people rush past. I'm going to create something beautiful in that house. Something that lasts. And maybe, years from now, Cora's kid will walk into my gallery and see that there's more to life than tradition and appearances. They're not going to make this easy, Allie warned. Good. I touched my healing hand. The best art never comes easy. My phone buzzed with a text from Francisco. Started working on the crown piece. Come see. I have to go, I told Allie. Time to make some art. Give 'em hell, she said. I smiled, already picturing Eleanor's face when the construction crews arrived. No, I'm going to give them beauty. That'll hurt them more. The light turned green, and I crossed the street, leaving the cafe and Emerson's desperate pleas behind. Ahead of me lay Francisco's studio, and beyond that, a future I was finally ready to paint for myself. The sound of power tools echoed through the Blake estate as workers transformed the space. I stood in what used to be Eleanor's precious formal dining room, now stripped bare except for my easel and canvases. The lighting system will be installed by Friday, the contractor said, checking his tablet. And the gallery rails are ready to go up as soon as we finish prepping the walls. Perfect. I stepped over cables and drop cloths to examine the north wall. And the security system? State of the art. Nobody's getting in here without your say-so. A commotion outside drew our attention. Through the window, I saw Eleanor standing at the front gate, gesturing wildly at the security guard. Speaking of which, I sighed. Excuse me a moment. I walked out to find Eleanor in full battle mode, designer handbag clutched like a weapon. "This is outrageous!" she shrieked. "That rent-a-cop won't let me into my own home." "Not your home anymore," I reminded her. "And his name is Marcus. He's former military and deserves respect." "You!" she sputtered, face reddening. "You're destroying everything. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" "Actually, I do." I gestured to the dumpster filled with her precious Victorian wallpaper. "I'm giving this house a purpose beyond hosting your toxic dinner parties." "How dare you?" "No, Eleanor, how dare you?" I stepped closer. "For 5 years, I tried to be good enough for your family. I smiled through your insults, endured your criticism, watched you turn my husband against me piece by piece. Emerson made his own choices." "Yes, he did. And so did I." I pulled out my phone and showed her Francisco's latest Instagram post. My restoration of a damaged Renaissance Madonna, now gleaming with new life. The post had over 50,000 likes. "What is this?" "This is what I've been doing while you were all laughing at my little hobby. Building a reputation, creating connections, proving that broken things can become masterpieces." A truck pulled up, carrying the custom gallery lighting. Eleanor watched, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. "The opening is in 3 weeks," I continued. "Critics from every major art publication will be here. They're particularly interested in my piece about family betrayal. You know, the one inspired by Thanksgiving? You wouldn't dare. Watch me." I nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward. "Now, unless you'd like to be escorted off the property, I suggest you leave. I have work to do." As Eleanor stormed off, Francisco appeared beside me, carrying a fresh canvas. "Nicely handled," he said. "Ready to get back to work?" Inside, I stood before my centerpiece, a massive triptych that dominated the main wall. The left panel showed a shattered wine glass, drops of blood-red wine frozen in mid-fall. The center panel was still in progress, a chaos of dark colors and sharp edges. The right panel remained blank. "I can't figure out how to end it," I admitted, picking up my brush. "Because you're not at the end yet." Francisco adjusted his glasses. The story's still unfolding. My phone buzzed, a text from Ali. "OMG, you need to see this." She'd sent a link to Cora's social media post, a long rant about family loyalty and artistic sacrilege, complete with photos of the estate's ongoing transformation. The comments section was unexpectedly divided, with several prominent art world figures defending the renovation. "Look at this one." Francisco pointed to a comment from a famous gallery owner. "Bold vision. Can't wait to see the space." I smiled, adding a streak of gold to the central panel. "Think they'll come to the opening?" "They already RSVP'd, along with half the city's art scene." He squeezed my shoulder. "Your revenge is going viral, my dear." I stepped back, studying my work. The paint glistened, wet and alive, like an open wound healing into something beautiful. It's not just revenge anymore, I realized. It's resurrection. A crash from the foyer interrupted us. We rushed out to find one of Eleanor's old portraits had fallen, its frame cracked. "Should we restore it?" Francisco asked. I picked up the painting, running my fingers along its gilded frame. "No, this one stays broken. Sometimes we need reminders of what we're leaving behind." I propped it against the wall, next to my supplies. A visual contrast between the old world and the new one I was creating. 3 weeks, Francisco mused. Think you'll be ready? I dipped my brush in paint, the color of dawn. I already am. They just don't know it yet. Returning to my triptych, I began to work on the final panel, finally seeing how it should end. Not with destruction or triumph, but with transformation. The moment when broken glass becomes a prism, scattering light in all directions. Behind me, the workers continued their symphony of renewal, and somewhere in the city, the Blakes plotted their next move. But here, in this room filled with possibility, I was already free. Opening night. The transformed Blake estate hummed with energy as hundreds of guests filtered through its renewed spaces. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over exposed brick walls, and the scent of fresh paint mingled with expensive perfume. "Is that the director from The Modern?" Allie whispered, nudging me. "And oh my God, there's that famous art critic from The Times." I smoothed down my black dress, designer, purchased with restoration money. "Focus, Allie. Any sign of the Blakes?" "Not yet, but—" She stopped mid-sentence. "Scratch that. Eleanor just walked in, and she brought reinforcements." Eleanor swept through the front door like an avenging angel, Cora and Emerson flanking her. She wore funeral black, as if mourning her former home. Cora's baby bump was visible under her tight red dress. Deep breath. Francisco appeared at my elbow, champagne in hand. "Remember, this is your night." I watched Eleanor's face as she took in the changes. Gone were her precious antique wallpapers and stuffy portraits. In their place, clean gallery walls displayed my work, a journey of destruction and rebirth told through art. "Ladies and gentlemen," Francisco's voice carried across the crowd, "if I could have your attention, please. It's time for our artist to say a few words." The room quieted. I stepped onto the small platform we'd set up, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. Eleanor's glare could have frozen hell. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "This house has a long history of tradition. For generations, it stood as a symbol of legacy and inheritance. Today, it begins a new chapter." I gestured to the walls around us. "Each piece you see tells a story of transformation, of taking something broken and making it not just whole again, but better. Different. True." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Several critics were taking notes. "And now," I continued, "I'd like to unveil the centerpiece of tonight's exhibition." 2 assistants pulled the black cloth from the triptych. Gasps echoed through the room. In the final panel, I'd painted what looked like thousands of shards of broken glass, each one catching and reflecting light differently, creating a kaleidoscope of color and possibility. "I call it Thanksgiving Grace," I said, looking directly at Eleanor. The art critic from The Times stepped forward. "The emotional depth is stunning, the progression from destruction to transcendence. Tell us, what inspired this piece?" Before I could answer, Eleanor's voice cut through the crowd. "I'll tell you what inspired it. Spite. Revenge. This entire spectacle is nothing but a tantrum from a woman who couldn't accept her place in our family." The room went silent. Cameras turned toward the drama unfolding. "You're right, Eleanor," I said calmly. "This is about not accepting my place. Because the place you tried to put me in was too small, too dark, too false." "How dare you?" "No." My voice rang out stronger. "How dare you come here and try to diminish this? Look around. Every person in this room sees the beauty I've created. Every critic, every collector, every artist. They all understand what you never could." "And what's that?" Cora sneered. "That true legacy isn't about preserving the past. It's about transforming it into something meaningful." I gestured to the triptych. Every broken piece in these paintings came from something real. That wine glass from Thanksgiving. Those shattered frames you threw away. Even the tears I shed. They're all here, made beautiful. The Times critic was scribbling frantically. Eleanor's face had gone pale. "You think you've won something here?" she hissed. "You've destroyed our home." "No, Eleanor, I've given it purpose." I picked up a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings." The crowd raised their glasses, effectively dismissing Eleanor's outburst. As conversations resumed, I watched Emerson lead his mother and sister away from the main gallery. "Holy shit," Allie breathed. "That was amazing." Francisco squeezed my shoulder. "Look." A wealthy collector was placing a red dot next to the triptych, sold, for more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Around the room, other red dots were appearing next to my pieces. "Olive?" A quiet voice behind me. I turned to find Emerson. "The divorce papers are on your lawyer's desk," I said before he could speak. "Signed." "I know, He looked around the transformed space. "I never knew you could do all this." "You never looked." I turned away from him, toward a group of admirers waiting to speak with me. "Goodbye, Emerson." As I moved through my gallery, my space, my creation, I felt lighter with each step. The Blakes had tried to break me, but they'd only succeeded in helping me create something extraordinary. The Times critic caught my eye and raised his glass. Behind him, through the window, I could see Eleanor's car pulling away into the night. Let her go, I thought. The house had a new story now, and this one, finally, was mine to tell. "Have you seen this?" Allie burst into my studio, waving her tablet. "The Times review just dropped." I set down my restoration tools, carefully stepping away from the 18th century landscape I'd been working on. 1 week after the opening, and the buzz hadn't died down. "Read it to me," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. In a stunning debut, artist and restoration expert Olive transforms family drama into transcendent art. The converted Blake estate now stands as a testament to rebirth, both architectural and personal. Allie looked up, grinning. "It goes on like that for 3 paragraphs. My phone buzzed, Riley calling. "Hold that thought." "Turn on the news," Riley said without preamble. "Channel 7. I grabbed the remote for the small TV I kept in the studio for background noise. The headline made my stomach drop. "Prominent Family Faces Financial Scandal." Sources reveal that the Blake Investment Group has been under federal investigation for months, the reporter was saying. Eleanor Blake and her son Emerson are accused of mismanaging client funds. "Oh my God." Allie's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not all," Riley said through the phone. "They've been using the estate as collateral for loans. If you hadn't gotten that deed when you did, the implications hit me like a physical blow. They would have lost the house anyway." "Exactly. And any art or artifacts inside would have been seized as assets?" On screen, footage showed Eleanor being escorted from her office building, head down, ignoring reporters' questions. Emerson was nowhere in sight. "Where's Emerson?" I asked Riley. "Word is he's cooperating with investigators. Turned on his mother to save himself." Of course he had. Emerson had always been good at saving himself. My other line beeped, Cora's number. After a moment's hesitation, I switched calls. "What do you want, Cora?" "Please." Her voice was thick with tears. "I need your help." "Why would I help you?" "Because I'm about to lose everything." She broke down, sobbing. "The baby. I don't have anywhere to go." Francisco walked in, took one look at my face, and mouthed, "What's wrong?" I held up a finger. "Cora, I know I was horrible to you," she cut in. "I was jealous. You had real talent, real passion, and I just had family money. Money that turned out to be stolen." I closed my eyes, remembering all the times she'd mocked my art, my dreams, my very existence in her perfect world. "The guest house," I said finally. "It's small, but it's clean. You can stay there until you figure things out." Silence on the line, then quietly, "Why would you do this?" "Because I'm not you." I looked at my triptych hanging on the studio wall. "And because sometimes broken things deserve a chance to be rebuilt." After hanging up, I filled Francisco and Allie in on everything. "You're really going to help her?" Allie asked incredulously. "The guest house is where I used to paint," I said, running my hands over the antique frame I'd been restoring. "It's where I learned who I really was, despite everything they did to break me. Maybe Cora needs that too. Francisco nodded approvingly. Speaking of rebuilding, he pulled out a newspaper clipping. The city's Historic Preservation Society wants to hire us. Apparently our work here has impressed them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Riley. Eleanor's lawyer reached out. She wants to make a deal. No deals, I texted back. The house stays as it is. You know, Allie said, reading over my shoulder, you could probably buy their entire company for pennies now. I shook my head. I don't want their company. I want this. I gestured around the studio at the half-finished restorations and new works in progress. This is real. This matters. Through the window, I watched a car pull up. Cora, with a small suitcase. She looked lost, nothing like the proud woman who'd laughed at my pain just weeks ago. I should go help her get settled, I said. Are you sure about this? Allie asked one more time. I picked up a small painting from my workbench, a simple landscape I'd restored, where damage had left beautiful patterns in the aged varnish. Sometimes the cracks are what make something interesting. Francisco smiled. Go. Be interesting. As I walked out to meet Cora, I passed the spot where that wine glass had shattered on Thanksgiving. Now it was marked by a small brass plaque. Here begins the restoration. Karma had come for the Blakes, but not in the way I'd expected, and somehow, in the midst of their destruction, I'd found a way to create something lasting, something true, something that finally was completely my own. The colors need to be warmer here, Francisco said, pointing to a section of the newly restored painting. See how the light catches? I adjusted my magnifying glass, studying the brush strokes. The restoration studio hummed with activity, 3 apprentices working at their stations, Cora cataloging pieces at her desk by the window. The doorbell chimed. Through the security camera, I saw Eleanor standing at the gate. Want me to send her away? Cora offered, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. No. I set down my tools. I'll handle this. Eleanor had aged years in just a few months. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple slacks and a sweater. She clutched a familiar-looking canvas. What do you want, Eleanor? She held out the canvas. This was in my mother's attic. I thought, maybe you could restore it. I unwrapped the painting carefully. A wedding portrait. Eleanor and her late husband on their wedding day. The canvas was cracked, the colors dulled by decades of neglect. Why bring it to me? Because you're the best. She swallowed hard. And because I owe you an apology. I studied the painting without responding. I was wrong about you, she continued. About your talent, your vision, everything. I was so focused on preserving what was, I couldn't see what could be. Like your son's illegal activities? She flinched. I enabled him, protected him when I should have. She gestured at the transformed estate. You did what I never could. You made something new. Inside, I could see Cora watching us, her face unreadable. The restoration will take time, I said finally, and it won't be cheap. I understand. I can pay. No, I met her eyes. You'll work for it. We need someone to manage the gallery's administrative side. Cora's going on maternity leave soon. Eleanor stared at me, then at the building behind me, at the brass plaque, at the elegant gallery spaces visible through the windows, at her daughter working inside. You'd trust me? After everything? Trust is earned. I handed her a business card. Be here Monday at 9. We'll start with filing. As she turned to leave, I added, Eleanor, the painting, I'll make it beautiful again, but it won't be exactly the same. I know. She smiled sadly. Maybe that's the point. Back inside, Cora was waiting. You're really hiring her? Everyone deserves a chance to restore what's broken. I set the wedding portrait on my workbench. Even Eleanor. Even Emerson? He made his choices. I picked up my tools again. This is about making new choices. Francisco appeared with fresh coffee. Speaking of choices, the Historic Society called again. They want us to handle the restoration of the old theater downtown. Take it, I said. But first, help me with this. Together, we examined Eleanor's wedding portrait, pointing out areas that needed attention, discussing techniques. Through the window, I could see Eleanor still standing at the gate, looking up at the house she'd lost, and maybe finally seeing it for what it had become. My phone buzzed, a text from Emerson. "I'm sorry for everything." I deleted it without responding. Some things weren't meant to be restored. "Look at this detail," Francisco said, pointing to a tiny flower in the portrait's background. "Almost invisible now, but once we bring it back, it'll change the whole composition," I finished. "Exactly." He squeezed my shoulder. "Just like you did." The afternoon light streamed through the windows, catching the gold leaf in my triptych, making it shimmer. Below it, new students worked on their own restorations, learning to see beauty in broken things. Cora waddled over with paperwork. "The gallery bookings are full through next season, and that critic from the Times wants to do a follow-up piece." "Tell him yes," I said, carefully beginning the cleaning process on Eleanor's portrait. "But make sure he mentions our restoration school. That's the future." As I worked, I could feel the painting's history under my fingers, decades of joy and pain, pride and loss, all waiting to be transformed, not erased, but renewed, made stronger by its scars, just like me. "Ready to begin?" Francisco asked, preparing his tools. I looked around my studio, at my students learning their craft, at Cora finding her place, at the space I'd created from the ashes of betrayal, at the legacy I was building, piece by restored piece. "Yes," I said, dipping my brush in solvent. "I'm ready." And as I began to work, bringing light back to Eleanor's forgotten memories, I realized that this moment, this place, this purpose, was the revenge I'd really wanted all along. Not destruction, but creation. Not endings, but beginnings. Not broken, but beautifully restored.